time to enter a saloon with one on his arm, and sometimes both. "I treat 'em like ladies. That's the secret," he said. "I always take off my socks. Sometimes they don't even charge." When that got back to Frank, he curled his lip. That little stump would have to pay a sheep. The first time they turned their pistols away from Mexicans and on each other was in the Blue Bottle Saloon in El Paso, from either end of the 50-foot bar the owner touted as the longest west of St. Louis. Both missed, being of an alcoholic temperament at the time, but stout Randy corrected that the next morning when he rousted lanky Frank out of a tub of bath water in the Cathay Gardens on Mesa Street and broke one of his short ribs with a .44 slug when Frank lunged for his Colt in its holster hanging on the back of a chair. He recovered, of course, or our story would end here, and he went looking for Randy, who'd been turned out of the outfit for shorthanding it just before the drive to Kansas, when every man-jack was worth twice the price of his string. The Circle X foreman, George Purdy, was infamous for solutions that doubled the original problems. He wound up a state senator in Indiana. Frank caught up with Randy in a stiff Wyoming winter in the middle of wolfing season and shot his horse out from under him, a result of windage, which is easier to miscalculate when you're using a shotgun at a distance. The horse rolled over on Randy, dumping $50 in bounty pelts lashed behind the cantle and shattering his leg. This a little more than evened the account, because while Frank's wound had healed, leaving him with nothing worse than a throbbing misery when it snowed or rained, Randy's injury left him with a limp and not much prospect of ranch employment unless he put in for cook, and prolonged exposure to greasy fumes gave him the Tucson two-step, and an unfortunate nickname among the hands. He reckoned that as one more charge against Frank's side of the ledger. As it happened, though, Randy's fortunes improved as a direct result. The buffalo harvest was coming to its summit, with the Industrial Revolution going full tilt back east, and in perpetual need of leather to make the belts to drive the gears of its manufactories, lap robes selling like tortillas among the carriage trade, and the Army offering to redeem empty cartridge shells for cash in order to offset hunting expenses and encourage the starvation of the pestiferous Indian. If the winter was long enough and the thermometer stuck on zero, the big shaggies grew coats that dragged the ground and made an enterprising man's fortune in a season. Randy oiled his good Ballard rifle, bought an Elmwood wagon and 4 months' worth of tinned sardines and peaches, and set off for the prairie with an experienced skinner and a half-breed guide. They prospered. Notwithstanding the inconvenience of a 3-month head cold and one frostbitten cheek that never did heal completely, Randy's share when they sold their first load of hides came to more than he'd seen roping and branding semi-tame bovines the previous 4 years. The breed guide, who for unexplained reasons went by the name of Prince Robert, asked him how he intended to invest his share. "Now I know how to hunt buffler. I'm fixing to spend every last dime tracking down Frank Farmer, putting a slug in his brain pan and curing his hide in the hottest sun I can find this side of Pharaoh. And the other side, too, comes to that." Prince Robert didn't pursue the point. He'd spent months of nights hearing his charge muttering Frank's name in his sleep, modifying it in terms that would shame a Virginia City bullwhacker. In the language of his Pawnee father, the guide referred to him in his thoughts as snake who drinks his own venom. He got his fill of it after 1 season, turned down the offer of another at twice the percentage, and signed on with the 7th Cavalry, with whom he spilled out his life's blood on the field the Sioux and Cheyenne called the greasy grass. No doubt thanking the man above with his last breath he didn't have to listen to Randy Locke consigning Frank Farmer to hell everlasting anymore. Needless to say, Randy's happier financial condition hadn't made him grateful to his nemesis. He knew that game leg was not the result of an altruistic act. If anything, prosperity gave him the luxury of turning his attention from the humdrum concern of survival to refining the details of his vengeance. Over open fires he chewed on buffalo tongue, pretending it was Frank's liver. And whenever he rode into a town to pick up supplies and provisions, he circulated a description of the man he hated among all the locals. They weren't much help, being locals and not inclined to travel and gather news in those brief few years when railroad construction was progressing at a crawl against natural obstructions and hostile tribes determined to eject the white man from their ancestral hunting grounds. If anything, his zeal for information made some of them suspect him of being a bounty killer, one of those flightless raptors the war had spewed out into the